There is absolutely no benefit for women of any age in taking statins. I mean, statins are a waste of money for women.
There's some real problems with taking statins. Memory loss, muscle problems, osteoporosis in women. I mean, there are a lot of reasons that you wouldn't want to take statin drugs.
And low cholesterol is a predictor for depression, suicide, violent behavior, strokes, and cancer. It's much better to have high cholesterol than lower cholesterol.
Like most people, I love the taste of fat. Human beings can't live without protein, and in nature, protein is usually surrounded with fat. Maybe Mother Nature actually knew what she was doing. Maybe there's a reason low-fat diets always made me feel depressed.
The brain is basically made of fat. They say you're a fathead, they were not kidding. And when you go on a diet that eliminates most fat, takes you down to say 10% of fat, you have basically robbed the body of the raw materials that are necessary for it to be happy.
There's probably no coincidence that back a couple of decades ago when the low-fat diet was the real rage, if you went to bookstores, what you saw is all these books on low-fat diet, and you saw all these books on depression because everybody was depressed.
When I load up on proteins and animal fats, I don't feel hungry and I do feel good. So on this diet, I'm ignoring the experts. Look at all that saturated fat.
This is my Passover dinner. From Jack in the Box.
It's like the discovery thing.
Sourdough chicken sandwich.
Night-night.
Here's the good thing about being middle-aged. Do I know these sunglasses look ridiculous? Yes. Do I care? No. My 2-year-old didn't feel like sleeping last night, so I had to get up with her a few times, and I ended up sleeping in too late to get breakfast. That's the bad news. The good news is it's going to be a big lunch. A bacon ultimate cheeseburger and a diet soda, please. Medium Diet Coke, make that.
Bacon ultimate cheeseburger and a medium Diet Coke?
That's right. Go on a shopping trip at your local natural food store and you'll find the shelves jam-packed with processed vegetable oils. But what exactly is natural about them? Would human beings living in the wild ever consume oils that came from soybeans or corn?
We've never had these in the human diet in the history of the world.
Where do you get fat from corn? If you take corn and put it in a thing and squeeze it, you don't get corn fat out of it. You don't get corn oil. You've got to chemically extract the oil from corn to get it.
Until that process was developed, you didn't have all of these vegetables, soybean oil and corn oil and cottonseed oil and all these things. Humans didn't eat that stuff.
The studies that came in on the corn oil showed that it was a disaster, that it caused cancer. If you gave carcinogens to rats who were fed corn oil, they developed cancer. If the rats were fed coconut oil or tallow, they didn't get cancer.
And it's not just cancer. After the experts convinced millions of Americans to switch from butter and lard to margarine and vegetable oils, heart disease went up. How can that be? After all, vegetable oils are cholesterol-free.
We as humans are not used to eating those fats in the quantities that we've been eating them. I mean, that's what's called an omega-6 fat. Omega-6 fats are pro-inflammatory. They cause inflammation. We need some of them, but we don't need a whole lot of them.
But we do eat a whole lot of them, and those unnatural fats can cause the inflammation that leads to heart disease, especially the most unnatural fat of all, partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, otherwise known as trans fats.
It gives you the cooking properties you need, the flakiness in biscuits and the chewiness in bread and the things that you look for from a saturated fat. But it doesn't behave as a saturated fat in the body, and the body actually will take it up very readily and pack it into the cell membranes, which then become stiff and inflexible and can't do their job.
The Center for Science in the Public Interest recently filed a lawsuit against KFC for using trans fats to fry chicken. And pretty much everyone agrees that trans fats are bad news. So why do the restaurants even use them?
The old McDonald's French fries, for example, were cooked in beef tallow, which is a saturated fat that's got lots of stearic acid in it. Stearic acid is a long-chain saturated fat that's been shown to actually either lower or have no effect on cholesterol. It's a pretty innocuous fat.
They had very well-publicized, very carefully orchestrated protests outside of McDonald's and the other fast food chains.
Took out petitions and went after them. And they made them change. And what they made them change to, of course, was partially hydrogenated vegetable fat. And he came up with one of his papers which said trans fatty acids not guilty as charged, and distributed all of this. Here is the head of the CSPI. And they're still in their journals. In other words, all you have to do is go take a look at it, and they said trans fatty acids not guilty as charged.
So their big jihad to get rid of saturated fat ended up making everybody switch to trans fats.
Somebody evidently said to them, "You're wrong, there's something wrong with the trans fatty acids," and they did an about face.
Now, the same group, the CSPI, is going after people for using trans fats, and they're only using the trans fats because they went after them for using the saturated fats in the first place.
And they lied, and they said, "Oh, we've been telling you all along that the trans fatty acids were a problem." And they just simply lied.
Apparently, believing that people were basing their diets on $10 buckets of movie popcorn, CSPI scared people away from a perfectly natural, healthy fat.
The study found 70% of all theaters tested still popping with high-fat coconut oil.
The scare was invented by Center for Science in the Public Interest, who, by their own admission, was being supported by the soy industry.
It's a saturated fat, but it's a good kind of saturated fat. It's got lauric acid in it, which is a good sort of immune-enhancing saturated fat. I mean, there's nothing in the world wrong with coconut oil.
They wanted the movie theaters to use partially hydrogenated soybean oil instead of coconut oil.
And what does it get replaced with? Trans fats that are much worse.
Thanks to the experts, the politicians, and the radical vegetarian nutcases, we've been scared away from perfectly natural animal fats that kept us healthy for millions of years. We scared men away from saturated fat, which helps to produce testosterone, and now we take Viagra. We scared parents into giving their kids skim milk while their brains are growing, and now we've got kids who can't concentrate and take drugs for ADD. And worse, the experts convinced us to switch to highly processed and completely unnatural fats that cause inflammation, weaken our cells, and make us sick.
This was all being pushed and advocated by people that Americans trusted, by our government, by people wearing white coats, scientists and doctors. And they were wrong. They were simply wrong. And we are reaping the whirlwind of the consequences today.
What are you doing?
Well, I thought people would want to hear the details on exactly how this diet is affecting our sex life. I was kind of hoping you could talk about that.
Are you a moron?
Sugar, sugar, makes me want to be with you. When I see you, my dreams come true.
The rise in heart disease, and especially the rise in obesity and diabetes, is very clearly about one thing. It's about carbohydrate.
That's the big problem that all these low-fat people have had with a low-fat diet, because a low-fat diet is a high-carbohydrate diet, okay? I mean, because you got to eat something, and fat and carbohydrate are kind of inversely proportional. When one goes down, the other goes up.
Which is exactly what the experts told us to do. The USDA Food Pyramid recommends a low-fat diet that includes up to 11 servings per day of grains.
To be based on grains is not the native diet for any mammal. There's only one group of animals that lives well on grains, and that's birds.
You know, the USDA food pyramid is more about selling agricultural products than it is about selling health.
They're totally committed to what can be sold in the commodity markets. So that's wheat, corn, soybeans, sugar.
A few years ago, I went back and pulled some labels off of feed sacks in a farmer's co-op and ran them through my little nutritional computer. I mean, there's virtually no difference in the macronutrient composition that farmers use to feed animals to fatten them up and that the USDA uses to tell us how to supposedly slim down.
In the 1990s, the Food and Drug Administration decided it was time to help us slim down. So they ordered food manufacturers to adopt a standardized nutrition label that includes recommended servings of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. FDA Commissioner David Kessler said it was the most important battle for public health he'd ever waged. Stories in the media were full of happy predictions about how much smarter Americans were going to eat, thanks to all that good government advice. And since then, well, maybe we're not following those guidelines. Or maybe we are. The nutrition label the FDA made everybody adopt recommends 300 carbohydrates per day on a 2,000-calorie diet. If you ate 4 cups of broccoli, 3 cups of spinach, 2 cups of peas, 5 carrots, and 2 apples, you would consume about 100 grams of carbohydrate. So how do you get to 300?
It would take a lot of cauliflower and broccoli and cabbage and those kind of things to ever get you to 300 grams of carbohydrate. You can do it with starch.
You can do it with, with potatoes, which are basically a pure starch. You can do it without a whole lot of corn or rice, but those are really starchy foods. And the starch in those breaks down in the GI tract basically to sugar.
The speed at which a particular food raises your blood sugar is measured by something known as the glycemic index. Table sugar has a glycemic index of 64. Coca-Cola has a glycemic index of 63. The foods we ate for millions of years almost all had a low glycemic index. So what about all those whole grains the experts tell us should be the foundation of a healthy human diet? Raisin Bran has a glycemic index of 61. Shredded wheat logs in at 67, which means it spikes your blood sugar faster than sugar does. And depending on the brand, whole wheat bread raises the bar to around 70.
Sugar.
So whether they intended to or not, the FDA and USDA are telling you to load up on sugar. And lots of it.
The amount of blood sugar in your blood, if you have a normal blood sugar, is a little bit less than 1 teaspoon. 300 grams of carb that comes as potato or pasta, even if it's whole grain pasta or whole grain bread, that converts to 1.5 cups of sugar. If you were to put 1.5 cups of sugar directly into your blood, you'd be dead. Your blood sugar would go sky high.
Since high blood sugar can kill you, your body has to bring it down. And that's how metabolic syndrome begins. Most of us think we only put fat in our fat cells when we eat too much. But as Gary Taubes explains in Good Calories, Bad Calories, your fat cells are like rechargeable fuel cells. Every time you eat, you store some fat. In between meals, fat comes out of your fat cells to provide the fuel for your muscles.